Ahoy there fellow pirates, it's good to see you all again for another video. If you've not seen it yet, I'd recommend going and watching my previous video about the maiden voyage before watching this one, but of course I can't make you do that. Something to do with human rights violations or something. I'm gonna start out by detailing a summary of this tall tale, followed by some of the secrets and references to other parts of Sea of Thieves lore that you can find in it. I know that the first time I did this tale, I was very confused as to what was going on, but that could be to do with the fact that I wasn't paying any attention to the dialogue. This tall tale can be started at any tavern by voting for the tale next to the mysterious stranger. He explains that we are setting off on a new and dangerous path to the shores of gold, a place of untold riches but also deadly traps. He further explains that it was swallowed up by the Devil's Shroud, and we must obtain the Shroudbreaker to reach it, an artifact which will protect your ship from the effects of the Shroud. To find it, we must follow in the Pirate Lord's footsteps and complete his unfinished quest to find this legendary artifact. But what caused Ramsey's quest for the Shroudbreaker to be cut short? This is outlined in his journal which he kept. The first page notes that this was written on his 9th summer on the Sea of Thieves, so it was about 7 years after he lost his leg and was betrayed by Rathbone. The journal is pretty vague, only really explaining that he had heard of this magical artifact which protected the ancients from the effects of the Shroud, and that they went searching for it aboard the Magpie's Wing, that first ship to enter the Sea of Thieves. With no explanation of how they found it, they located an ancient chest containing a totem used for unlocking a vault. Unfortunately, with the chest aboard, they were attacked by a ship called the Burning Blade, and despite being the greatest pirate who ever lived, he pussied out and ran, throwing the chest into the sea with the justification that they could use the ship's log to find it later. The following pages explain where they were eventually chased to and sunk, and so the first ship to ever journey into the Sea of Thieves in the golden age of piracy was lost to the waves, pretty much slap bang in the middle of the map at Uncharted Isle N13, also known as Storage Crate Island. Upon locating the Magpie's Wing, we can locate the ship's log sat on the captain's chair. We can then trace the route the wing took through the Sea of Thieves and where they dropped the chest off. Following this, we will find the ancient chest on the seabed at this location, which can be different each time you do the tale. Inside the chest you'll find a totem and some pages that will point you in the direction of the vault, which is at Crux Hollow. I wondered if there were any other possible locations for the Shroudbreaker vault to spawn, so I did a little research, and any guides on the internet seem to say that the vault can spawn in a few different places based on the totem that you obtain from this tall tale. However, I took a look at quite a few guides and playthroughs of this tale, and all led to Crux Hollow, so I believe that Crux Hollow is the most common spawn location for the Shroudbreaker. If you have experienced otherwise, I'd love to know about it. I read every comment. Unlocking the vault leads you inside just like a Gold Hoarder vault, but the braziers must be lit before the puzzle commences. The puzzle is very basic and only has you turning the blocks to copy the layout of the symbols in the book 3 times. We're not done yet though. We need to dig up 3 medallions which are buried in locations shown in the reflection in the water in the middle of the vault. After digging up and plugging in all 3, the Shroudbreaker is revealed, and we must make our escape from the infinitely spawning coral skeletons. It does feel quite exciting, like Indiana Jones or something, despite the fact that you're in pretty much zero danger whatsoever if you just power walk. Right, guess we're sorted then. Time to go to the shores of gold. Oh, never mind. Apparently someone removed the 4 jewels that grant the Shroudbreaker its power, and we have to do like 7 more tall tales to find them all. I've got my work cut out for me, eh? What's more, the only lead we have in locating the stones is Captain Briggsy, who's a skeleton lord, and so the mysterious stranger tells us to head to Madame Olivia of the Order of Souls to learn about Briggsy's whereabouts. But that's a story for the next episode. Well, you might be thinking we're done here. How much could there possibly be to explain? Well, you might be surprised. Firstly, let's talk about this cheery chappie, the mysterious stranger. We know his real name to be George, as before the anniversary update, he introduced himself as such, and apparently, he also had a Spanish accent at the time.
Soon be a legend, right?
So I'm not too sure what happened there. He also had a female counterpart at the time called Gloria, who got removed because the Sea of Thieves people are sexist, but she did show up in a recent comic. George's role is as a representative of the Pirate Lord, thanks to what he calls his unique talents. Unfortunately, not much is known about him beyond that, but I think it's safe to assume that he was part of Ramsey's alliance when he was still alive.
This book is the journal of the Pirate Lord himself. It tells of his first ship, the Magpie's Wing.
The Magpie's Wing wasn't Ramsay's first ship, it was probably his second after the Magpie's Fortune. I think maybe you're a bit underqualified for this job, mate. When we open up the journal, the Pirate Lord is writing about the shores of gold, and an island that was swallowed up by the Shroud there. Yet he gives no explanation as to how he knows about this island. Same goes for the Shroudbreaker. How could Ramsay possibly know about this mythical artifact? These questions are answered in the accompanying 5 journals that can be found when this tale is active. These journals were written by Mercia, a member of Ramsay's crew, who I discussed a little in the previous video. What I didn't mention is that she's something of a scientist, or a natural philosopher as they were called back then. And what does a scientist do when they discover magic, but study it, and figure out how to harness it? Mercia wrote about all kinds of magical and cursed artifacts in her later life, compiling all this information in tomes that were to be hidden. Could this be the origin of the Tomes of Curses? I think not, given that they seem to be marked with skeleton runes and what looks like the symbol of the burning blade, the very ship that scuttled the Magpie's Wing. On to the journals then. Rather than read out all of the journal's text as I did last time, I'll just be summarising them this time. It starts with Ramsay asking Mercia if there could be a way to protect their ship from the Shroud, and she promises to find a way. She realises that the key to staying safe in the Shroud must lie with the ancient inhabitants of the Sea of Thieves, and so makes her way to the Ancient Isles. If the ancients lived on islands that would sometimes be swallowed up by the Shroud for years at a time, they would have needed to protect themselves from the mist using some kind of magic. Upon cross-referencing some notes she'd made on Thieves' Haven at some point, she found proof of the Shroudbreaker's existence, but the journal gives no explanation as to where this proof can be found. She also discovered that it was indeed used to protect their homes and places of worship from the effects of the Shroud, and was sometimes taken to a vault to recover its powers. Finally, Mercia and Ramsay visit someone at Plunder Outpost who had sailed too close to the Shroud and seen an island full of vast riches where the very ground was made of gems and precious metals. Way to get our hopes up, only for us to discover that the ground there is in fact made of sand. And so the crew of the Magpie's Wing scoured the Sea of Thieves until they found an ancient chest on Discovery Ridge, containing the key to the Shroudbreaker. There's no explanation as to how they found it, they just did. And that's where it all went a bit wrong. They were pursued by the Burning Blade. But what is the Burning Blade? This was the first mention of this infernal ship, and at the time that this tall tale was released, it was a bit of a mystery. We now know this to be Flameheart's ship, and its figurehead can be found on Wanderer's Refuge, as well as one of its cannons that was taken by Wander to create the cursed cannonballs. I'll be going into more detail about Wander in a later video. You can encounter a ghostly apparition of the Burning Blade for yourself during Max Level Order of Souls Ghost Fleets, and during the Heart of Fire Tall Tale. There's still no explanation for why Flameheart decided to attack the Pirate Lord's ship, whether he was after the Shroudbreaker, or simply intending to destroy the Magpie's Wing. Perhaps we'll find out in the upcoming Flameheart book. I said earlier that the Pirate Lord pussied out and ran from the Burning Blade, but upon closer inspection, it's kind of a fair line of thought for him to run. The Magpie's Wing was not built for combat, it was built for journeying through the Devil's Shroud. Unlike the Burning Blade, which was built to rain fire down on its enemies, the Magpie's Wing had precious cargo aboard, which could be very bad in the wrong hands, and so I think Ramsay made the most sensible play he had. One thing I do wonder about is why Ramsay never went after the chest himself. It's not too difficult to pick up where he left off, the ship's log isn't hard to find. Perhaps, as long as Flameheart was on the Sea of Thieves, it was too dangerous. One interesting thing I noticed is that the Magpie's Wing's ship's log uses the same model as the Athena voyage, which makes sense since both were created by the Pirate Lord. The vault puzzle on this tall tale is an interesting one, as it seems to tell a story. The Shroudbreaker and 3 warriors, 3 boats and a person holding the Shroudbreaker, the person holding the Shroudbreaker, and 3 groups of people, which seem to include merfolk. Could this signify the Shroudbreaker being taken to different islands to protect them from the fogs, protecting both human and merfolk alike? I can't say for sure. When I first replayed this tall tale, I thought there was a major plot inconsistency. However, I have now realised that the story does still make sense. You see, this tall tale is about the Pirate Lord trying to reach Tribute Peak by using the Shroudbreaker. However, he does go to Tribute Peak in the Athena's Fortune book, so how does he do this? Well, about 13 years after the events of this tall tale, Tribute Peak was released from the Devil's Shroud. In fact, it remained outside of the Shroud up until Lorena entered the Sea of Thieves for the first time. It was even described as being the heart of the wilds, after which it was swallowed back up by the fog. It does cheapen the experience of travelling there a little bit if I'm honest. Anyway, I think I've covered pretty much everything there is to cover on the Shroudbreaker, so I'll be back soon to talk about the Cursed Rogue. Until then, safe voyages everyone.